Hi, you're listening to After Dinner Conversations, short stories for long discussions. What that means is we get short stories, we select those short stories, and then we discuss them specifically about the ethics and the morality of the choices the characters and the situations put us in. Why did you do this? What makes you do this? What makes us good people? What's the nature of truth, goodness, all of that sort of stuff. And hopefully we're all better, smarter people for it and learn a little bit about why we think the way we think. So thank you for listening. Hi, and welcome back once again to After Dinner Conversation Discussions. Wait a minute, no, what's it called? It's called
Podcast.
The podcast for After Dinner Conversation Publishing. The podcast, though, it changed its name when we had the companion podcast. So now it's Philosophy, Ethics, Short Story Discussions, where we discuss the stories. The other one is Philosophy, Ethics, Short Story Audiobooks, where we have the audiobooks be read to you, which is going really well, actually. It's going, we've won like episode 6 or 7 of that. I am your co-host, Colby, here with Ashley.
Hello.
And after a little bit of a break, we're like 5 days late with this or something. We're doing another discussion about a great story. I should also mention a few other things. Number one, you can go to our website, afterdinnerconversation.com. Number two, you can like and subscribe to the podcast. That would be awesome. And of course, the best thing you can do is to get the magazine, which is $1.95 a month or $4.95 a year for the introductory price by going to our website. But you can also get it through Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Apple and every place else. So get the magazine if you haven't. Those are the stories we're going to be discussing as the magazine stories. Did I forget anything?
You're on it.
Okay, good deal. So
the anthology books, too.
The print books. You can actually get print books. That's right. It's been going for like 3 years now. It seems like I'd be better at this by now. Yeah. Oh, and also, we've switched when we release our podcasts. So they're going to start coming out on Tuesday mornings. Because it turns out that's a better time to release podcasts, apparently. And we've been doing them on Sundays before. So this will come out on a Tuesday. Okay, so let's do our story. Our story, I've already forgotten the name of it, even though I just read it, which is a little embarrassing.
Cruel Means Bitter Ends.
There we go, by Marin Bilaskov. So yeah, you want to talk about the story? You want me to talk about it? It's up to you.
You are the pro at it. It's all you.
Okay, so this is actually... it's a well-written story. It is not a complicated story. It's not like there's like a million plot points to it, which is kind of nice. It's a very readable story, which I mean that in a good way. It is in a different world, a different setting, and whatever. And in this world, a soldier worked his way all the way up through the ranks to eventually become Prime Minister. And the reason he worked his way through the ranks was because they have been at war for, according to the article or the short story, 1,000 years with their rivals, a theocratic nation. I forget the exact name of it. It was like the theocracy of something something. And he ran for president, saying that, look, if you elect me, I will end this war. And I promise you in my first term, we'll be writing the eulogy for a nation. The person who's telling the story is actually his like assistant guy who followed him through the military and followed him to the prime ministership, from the military to the prime ministership. And in a normal routine review, found that their like big war-ending operation like Swiftwind or something, I think it was.
Swiftwind, yep.
Swiftwind, that's about to happen.
3 days away.
3 days away, thank you, has a leak. And the leak is at the highest levels, like from the Prime Minister's office. So the narrator rushes into the Prime Minister's office and says, Prime Minister, we've got a problem. We've got a leak. I need approvals to find out who this leaker is of our information. It's a big deal. And the Prime Minister says, which I thought was a little bit weird, but I liked it, was like, let's step into the bathroom and discuss it, implying that like the office might be bugged.
Yep.
And so as the assistant guy steps into the office, the Prime Minister shuts and locks the door on him and locks him in the bathroom. And then the Prime Minister starts talking to the guy through the bathroom wall. And he kind of does I don't know how I would describe it. Maybe you can describe it better. Like he does basically a discussion with the guy because the Prime Minister, feels guilty or confused or something. Like he needs repentance. Like he needs forgiveness.
He's doing a confessional.
A confessional. That's a great way to do it. And actually, it's kind of like a little confessional booth now that I think about it.
Yep.
And so he basically explains to the guy through the door that's now locked in the bathroom, I'm the one who leaked to the other side. I've been providing our own people with false information, and basically that he has set them up to lose the war. And his reasoning is, like, for 1,000 years, people have been dying, and I think that the enemy is evil. They killed my family. They killed people. I've killed lots of them. They are not good people. There's not, like, reasonable debate about the quality of their civilization. They're evil. However, the only way to end this is to end it. And we can't end it by winning it, so we might as well end it by losing it.
The quote was, they're not going to give up, so we have to. If anyone is ever going to be happy, evil has to prevail.
There you go. Yeah, and he even calls them evil, right? Mm-hmm. Like they are... It's not like he's thinking like they're the better side.
No.
And that's kind of the end of the story. He leaves the guy in the bathroom. And he also says, and I think this is like a nice little nod to like Austin Powers or those... he says basically like, yes, I'm telling you my plans and I'm locking you in the bathroom, but really like everything is already in place and already happening. So even if you got out of the bathroom, you couldn't really stop it. You could just maybe make it more confusing. But, someone will find you tomorrow anyway, of course, and it's not going to matter. It wouldn't matter if you got out of the bathroom now exactly. The other thing I forgot to mention is the Prime Minister, because he was a former soldier, is actually going to be at the front line with the troops and fully expects to be captured and killed in this process of this failed attack. So it's not like he's going to get away from this scot-free. He knows what his future is. Like I said, not a complicated story, but a clever one for sure. I don't know. What did you think? Like, dislike?
Well, it's definitely a means to an end, and that's the ultimate question.
Yeah.
This war has been going on for thousands of years, and they've been stagnant for who knows how, thousands of years, and so the Prime Minister just sees as like that's your only move in the chess game.
Is to lose. Because otherwise you're just standing there and letting all of your people die, over and over and over again. One interesting point too is when they're having this confessional at the very end, he's like, you're just not thinking right. You're suicidal. You're not healthy. And he's like, well, maybe I'm not, but this is like the only, again, logical thing for me to think of. Right.
So it's scary in a way because you can have one leader maybe having like a psychological break.
Yeah.
And decide to do this. And ultimately, like, your whole side ends. So I think it's an omen to no one person should ever have ultimate power to decide everyone's fate of your country.
Yeah. Well, one of the things it reminded me of a little bit is, how like in World War I, they had the trench warfare where the guys would come over and they just get machine gunned down.
Yep.
And like 20,000 people would die in a day and no land would trade places. Nothing would change. And so, something crazy like a quarter or a third of all military age men between like 18 and 25 died in England from this. And really none of it mattered, right? And so it does, I assume that's kind of the situation here where thousands of people or tens of thousands of people can die and really territory doesn't really change hands much.
No, they said they came to a border in the Eastern Alps.
Right.
And it just stopped cold. And then no matter what anyone did, no one was making any progress. They were just stuck at the Eastern Alps.
Yeah. So I'll tell you from my side of it when I read it, my first thought when I read it was like, no, like if they're evil, like you fight to the bitter, bitter end. Mm-hmm. Like, and I totally get that perspective. But then there's some other things that I thought of. Number one of course you think they're evil. They think you're evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so that determination is sort of inherently culturally biased. I mean, one of the tips of the hand is like that they're a theocratic, whatever. They're a sort of a religious, really run thing. But whatever. So is Nepal. So is, the Vatican Church. And then the other thing I was thinking about the cultural bias and just assuming that they're evil and you're not the evil ones. And then the other thing I thought about, and this is maybe a little esoteric, like a little bit like nuanced or weird, is there's been lots of times in history where the barbarians have invaded the civilized people and in the process become civilized. Like they were the conquerors in like that they took over the city. But then if you look forward like 300 years, like, oh, they adopted their language and they adopted their religion and they adopted their hygiene habits and they adopted their... And so just because someone's like the invading barbarian doesn't mean that they might win the war, but lose the culture war. And so
it's hard to interact with someone even in a war and not take something that you've learned from the other side.
Yeah, or like invade their cities and not be like, hey, this indoor toilet thing works pretty well. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. So actually I started off like 100% on the side of this is the wrong choice. And the more I thought about it, the more I got myself to like a 50-50.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So I do not agree with his decision.
Okay.
I don't think any one person should determine a whole country's fate.
Sure.
Because I feel like, so I need more context. Are people being drafted against their will to go and fight? That would be my first question.
I mean, I would assume so. If you're in a war of this length of time, like...
Well, again, lineage, my grandfather, his grandfather, so on and so forth, has been going to war and fighting. So is it more of a voluntary thing, like people are signing up to do the fight, or is it constantly being drafted? That would be my first question, because I feel like... Because
I assume you'd be more against it if there was drafting going on.
Yes.
Yeah, you're always anti-drafting.
Because now you're, people are against them wanting to. There's a reason why you have to do drafts. It's because people aren't lining up to go fight.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I disagree with one person determining that everyone in their country is going to die. Like you just made that death sentence for everyone.
Yeah.
But I guess that's essentially what you're doing when you do a draft too. You're like, hey, you're going to go to war and you have no choice over it.
Yeah.
I don't.
So if there was a draft, like a mandatory draft, you'd be more in favor of what he's doing?
No, I don't agree with anything I don't think there should be mandatory drafts.
Well,
I don't know. I don't think there should be one person.
But every war has a draft. Like World War I had a draft. World War II had a draft. The Vietnam War had a draft. Like the Civil War had a draft. Like you can't raise like millions of troops through volunteers.
Then maybe you shouldn't be doing what you're doing if your people aren't lining up behind you.
That's a good point. Like if you can't get people to volunteer to fight, maybe you're not fighting for a good enough reason.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I can see that. So you think that he's making the wrong choice by losing the war?
I think he should give the choice to the people. Be like...
Do you trust people to make that choice though? Like I feel like what person's going to go on like the equivalent of social media or whatever and be like, yeah, let's be invaded.
I'd like to know, what are they fighting over? Like, is it just a territory? Is a parcel of land? Is it a something or other? Because are there options to like, he didn't discuss any mediation options. He didn't discuss any previous talkings that happened. He didn't even talk about what they were fighting like over. Like, and so...
So does any of that affect your opinion then?
I still don't think that you should just be like, yeah, no, we're just gonna, like, tap out. So you have all these people that are fighting on your behalf, and then people that are just, like, trying to live their lives, and now they're going to die.
Yeah. Because
you decided you basically gave an execution sentence to every single one of their citizens.
Sure, but he... may have also given a life sentence to all the people in 10 years who don't have to go to war.
For their side?
No, for our side too, because once you've surrendered, the fighting's over.
Yeah.
I mean, like, so let's say that, I don't know, whatever, 5,000 people die every day at war. And then he has this big, terrible battle and a bunch more people die, but then the war's over. So then, like, your kids don't have to go to war. The part that I don't know about that is you don't know how terrible the other side really is, right? Like, maybe the other side, is like, everyone we conquer is now a slave. Or if we do win, we're going to kill every boy over the age of 8 or something, like.
Or is it something trivial, like everyone in this country wears blue, everyone in that country wears red.
Right.
If we conquer you, you now have to wear our color.
Gotta wear red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think he's purposely vague on all these details. Like, I don't think this was an accident, because if you start giving details like why you're at war or what happens if you lose, then you've gotten rid of the essential question in the story, right? And the question in the story is it ever appropriate to lose in order to end a conflict?
I definitely see. Sorry, I'm just like thinking about this as we're going along.
Yeah.
We know he was voted into Prime Minister on the platform that the war was going to end. So obviously the people want it to end.
Right. And the implication is they assumed it would end successfully. Like. Hi, this is Colby, and you are listening to After Dinner Conversation, short stories for long discussions. But you already knew that, didn't you? If you'd like to support what we do at After Dinner Conversation, head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/After Dinner Conversation. That's right, for as little as $5 a month, you can support thoughtful conversations like the one you're listening to. And as an added incentive for being a Patreon supporter, you'll get early access to new short stories and ad-free podcasts, meaning you'll never have to listen to this blurb again. At higher levels of support, you'll be able to vote on which short stories become podcast discussions. And you'll even be able to submit questions for us to discuss during these podcasts. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being the kind of person that supports thoughtful discussion. And the implication is they assumed it would end successfully. Like, he wasn't going to be like, if you elect me, I'll lose us the war.
But either way, people are like, end of war. Yes, we want end of war. It doesn't matter how, we just want end of war. So if that's the context of it, I don't know what promises he made. But on that, you can tell that people want it to stop.
Yeah.
And I can see on one hand, he didn't lie. He's like, I'm going to end this.
Right.
And sure enough, he is. He's keeping his promise.
Yeah.
Maybe some people would be upset about how he's doing it, but he's keeping his promise.
Yeah. All right, so let me give you a hypothetical then. Maybe it's easier with a concrete. So, America's fought in a bunch of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and all these places, or Vietnam, or basically every country in the world. Do you think it's fair to say, like, hey, we're not doing great in these countries. Like, let's just lose. Let's just, we're good. Let's just, pull out.
If we're in their territory.
Let's take Afghanistan for an example, right? Like, that was the big fiasco of the last one. Of lately was we were in Afghanistan for 10 years or 15 years. And then one day, Biden was just like, you know what? I'm done. And they just packed up and left.
Well, the big
argument. Women have to cover their face.
The big argument on that was that the Afghan people themselves were not standing up to fight them.
Sure.
And so in that case, you're like, yo, we're not going to fight on your behalf. You've also got to stand up as a whole and organize yourselves. We're going to help you out a little bit. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of that argument was the Afghan people themselves weren't stepping up. And in that case,
that's certainly part of the narrative.
We can't,
we're not going to fight for you.
Yeah, no, we're not going to, hold your hand the whole way. Finally, at one point, you got to get off the couch and do to work too.
Yeah. I think for me, in order to know the answer to if I think he made the right choice, I would have to know what happens after they lose. But I don't think anyone can ever know that about any war. That's the problem, right? Is you have to say, I'm willing to lose, not knowing what will happen after we lose. I think that's part of the...
The only thing I can think off the top of my head of instances where you have like two superpowers fighting over each other is the democracy versus communism one.
Sure.
Like that is a huge divide. So, okay, say the Democratic side goes like, no, we're not going to, keep fighting now. You're communism or vice versa.
Sure. Like, I don't know what would have happened during the Cold War if America had just put out a press release. It was like, we're good. Like, we're good. I don't know. Like, that is kind of what Russia did or the USSR did, is they were just like, we're done. I mean, in that case, they just sort of splintered apart, but.
Yeah. I don't think under any context is it appropriate for any country to interfere with another country.
Yeah. But we do it all. I tend to agree. Yes, because I watch too much Star Trek, and that's like one of the main things in Star Trek is like.
Knew we couldn't do a podcast without a reference to Star Trek.
Because it's the greatest show ever.
Of course, Star Trek reference.
Yeah. It's the greatest show ever. No, but I mean, that's one of the main things, right? Is that you don't interfere with other civilizations and their natural progress. Because you don't know how it's going to turn out. And you don't know if they're right or wrong. And it's very biased to sort of interfere with... So, and this is the thing, I think we've talked about this before. So let's take Afghanistan as an example, where it's like, wow, okay, so just like 2 weeks ago, they declared that all women had to have full head coverings. And like, while that is offensive to me, like, not my country. Mm-hmm. Like, why is it any of my business? Mm-mm. Like, and so, I mean,
the reason why we do it is because that country offers us something, whether it be territory,
oil,
opportunity for base, oil. But even then, I'm sorry, if your country doesn't have enough of object A, then you're going to have to make alliances with other countries. Like, I understand you need to have those partnerships, but you can't invade another country because you've run out of alliances with other people or you don't have enough of that resource. Like, to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, switch from oil, go to electric, whatever.
So is there a good reason? I'm just trying to figure this out. Like, so for me, I was trying to think, like, when is it okay to surrender? Like, when you sort of put pride aside, like, I feel like for me, the distinguishing factor is what happens after you've surrendered. Mm-hmm. And what freedoms do you lose? What things do you lose? Beyond just like, well, we don't get to call ourselves by our national... we lose our national anthem. Like, you know what? Maybe losing your national anthem isn't worth like 20% of your population. Like, but if somebody said like, look, if America surrendered, you would have to start wearing full head covers. I'd be like, oh no, we fight to the end. Like, we fight to the last person.
Yeah, it depends on what the other person is doing. Now, one thing I will say about this leader, how strong must he have been to have kept the secret and seen it as the only option and carried it out?
Yeah, he's he
fully believes in that. Like, that this is our option.
Yeah.
And to actually do it. Like,
and
my
send millions
gosh.
of people to their deaths or whatever.
My gosh. And I'm just going to use an instance. Like, say you have a dog. It's very old.
Yeah.
And people are like, no, keep him living because I love him. And it's like, the dog is suffering.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a perfect example. The dog is suffering. Like, are you going to...
The dog being their country.
Are you going to prolong the suffering? Are you like, am I the only one here that realizes that this is eventually not going to... Like, he's going to die anyway.
Yeah.
So you might as well just now... That's a great analogy there. A little bit.
I mean, I think where the analogy breaks down is we know that there's, in the case of a dog that's sick, like, you know it's in pain now, and you know that pain will stop when you put it to sleep.
Yeah, there's no other...
It's not like you're going to dress the dog up in a burqa every day after you put it to sleep.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing, right? Is like, I think as I'm trying to like work this through in my head, and I'm totally working it through as we're talking, I think that part of it is like, are there core values that you would lose by that surrender?
Maybe he sees it as simple as that. Like, not going to be that hard of a transfer. These other people It's not going to be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
He knows himself he's going to die, by the way. He doesn't have an escape plan. He's not going to go hide under a bunker.
He's not cheating the system.
They're like, they're coming to me first. I signed away my own death warrant. Like, I get it. So that's commendable. Like, to make the decision, know you're going to die. So it does make me think maybe the consequences of this takeover aren't going to be so drastic. Yeah. Maybe they are going to save people.
Maybe. I don't know. And the story doesn't tell us. I mean, I think of the example of, this is again kind of a weird example. So the end of World War II, after America uses atomic bombs on Japan, there were many military people in Japan who wanted to fight against America, even when America had atomic bombs. And it was the emperor who was like, no, atomic bombs are bad. We should probably surrender. And so that is an example of like, you're surrendering knowing that your way of life is going to change drastically, right? Like they went from basically like an emperor feudal system to like a democracy. But for the people that were in power, their time in Japan ended with that surrender, right? And so to them, they would be like, you're ending our culture. Like, you're putting an end to our civilization as we understand it, which I assume to those people would be terribly offensive. Mm-hmm. And yet, from our perspective, we're like, democracy in Japan's kind of worked out well for you guys. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's the same thing in here, right? Like, to them, it'll be like, our society is ending. But from the other side's perspective, they're going to be like, we're going to make you better. You just don't know it yet. And so there's a lot of that cultural bias that goes into it that I don't know the answer. That's why I'm super
I don't know. I mean, is the other person like, we're going to make your life better, so we're just going to like beat you into submit? Like, I don't know. It's like, if I hit you and hit you and hit you and you're like, I'm going to make your life better, just stop fighting me back. I'm like, would you really trust that person who is literally beating you? Right. Like, life is going to be good for you. It's not.
Surely both sides have done war atrocities during this, so the other side feels like they could never forgive. Yeah. Like, that's just the way war goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's see if we got any other questions we've got here.
So I'm interested in, so I'm very much like, no, he shouldn't have done this.
I'm a 50-50.
Why? What is the pro? Why do you support his decision? On the glimmer of hope that life would be okay?
Yes.
And he delivered on his promise that the war would end?
Yes. Because I think at the end of the day, there are instances, and I'm not saying all instances, but I think there are some instances where if you strip away your cultural bias that believes that your way of life is the only suitable way of life for people, that saving people's lives might be more valuable than saving your quote-unquote like way of life. And I'm trying to think like, what's the line where I'm like, no, that's too far. And I don't know what that is because I'm so wrapped up in my own view on culture, right? So, like, if
Canada invades America, we're whatever. We're, like, pretty much equal.
Right, but if a religious extremist group of any religion were to invade America, and I'd be like, no, we're going to fight to the last person. But that's only because I personally believe that religious extremists are wrong. But they would be like, hey, 100 years from now, remember when you didn't believe in religious extremists? Like, we fixed you. Look how great your life is now. Like, the same way those people in power in Japan would look at the democracies today being like, you say you fixed us, but you ruined us. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard for me to sort of remove my own cultural bias. But I think if it was something that somehow took away like some very core values to... I'd be like, no, I'm out. Like, I can't surrender. But I'm like a 50-50, honestly. And I wouldn't be a 50-50 if it was like a 20-year war. Like, if we're talking like, a third of the population, I'd probably be like, nah, that's probably okay. But if it's 1,000-year war, you're talking about like whole family lineages that no longer exist, right? You're talking about basically if someone in your family hasn't died, like, something like your neighbor to your left or your neighbor to your right has had several family members die. Mm-hmm. And so it's like at a certain point, I just tap out. I'm just like, I'm like, I think some parents would rather have alive children than dead morals, than dead children and morals, right? Be like, but we were right.
But what the other side of that is, again, you're fighting. You might have been that one day away from winning.
Sure, it's possible.
And yet you were like, white flag.
Yeah, no, that's totally possible. I agree. Yeah, and the story makes it seem like they're not one day away.
No.
But maybe they are. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm being naive about this, but I just feel like there's a lot of morality until it's your kid that died. Like there's a lot of like protecting morality until it's your kid that died. And then you're like, you know what? I'd really like my kid back. Like, the one thing I do struggle with this is the guy being elected to end the war. And I feel like he a little bit betrays the people that elected him. Because I assume that they thought like he had some secret plan to win the war.
Well, yeah, he has the Swift thing. That sounds like a great plan.
Right. A good name is all you need.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I feel like in that sense, it's kind of like it's pretty horrible to lie to your people about like, I've got a plan and your plan is to lose. Mm-hmm. Now, if he'd have said, my plan is to lose or surrender, and then they had voted for him, and then he surrendered, I'd be like, oh, no, you're doing exactly the will of the people. Mm-hmm. Like, but he didn't run it for office saying like, if you elect me, I will surrender. So that's one problem I have with his strategy. But I'm
just looking at my notes to see
if
there's anything else. But
I think that's everything I had to say about it. But yeah, if there's anything else.
Yeah. I'm the one thing that makes me think that there's a reason why both sides are fighting so strongly is because typically when like war starts, like it's like, oh, yeah, go after them. Like think after 9/11, everyone's like, go get them.
It's like a war fever.
And then after like a couple of years, people are like, all right, our men are dying.
Right.
Like we got, we tried to get the bad guy. Like there's no we're spending millions of dollars. And finally people are just kind of like, can we just stop?
Right. Like you just get war weary.
Yeah.
And so your thought is if it's 1,000 years you haven't gotten war weary, you must be fighting for a really good reason.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I think that is very possible.
Or
propaganda took over.
Or things have just gotten so messy where enough people have gotten pissed off.
I think after 1,000 years, I think that's part of it. Like, why do you hate the enemy? Well, because they killed my father. Well, why did they kill your father? Well, because he killed their father.
Yeah.
And so it just becomes like we're at war because there's just like too many axes to grind. Yeah. I suppose that's good. It's a good story. I liked it. It's very readable. Like it reads very, we get a lot of stories that are very, like they're just smooth. Like they read like butter. I like those kind of stories.
Chime in. What are you willing to fight for? What are you willing to be like?
I would love to read people's comments about that. That'd be really interesting.
Where is that line? What things are you willing to like give up in order for peace versus what can you not live without that will keep you fighting?
Yeah, I would love to read that in the comments. Mm-hmm. You can go, that's a great point. You can go to our webpage because the podcast is on our webpage. And then there's a comment section under the podcast on our webpage, and you could totally comment on it. I'd be curious because, like, for example, let's say we'll use something easy, right? Like, so let's say that we were to stalemate with the Taliban, that we're fighting with them. Would you surrender to the Taliban just to end the war after so many years, knowing what they sort of stand for? Or would you, and then take your example, would you surrender to Canada if after 1,000 years you were like, I think I would surrender to, actually I'd surrender to Canada now. I don't even need a war. I would just surrender to Canada.
You want some of that maple syrup.
I want some of that health care. Yeah. I mean, they're already buying all the homes down here.
Like what sort of freedoms would you be willing to give up? Or what sort of regulations would they impose on you that you would be like, if they were like, no more cars, you have to bike everywhere, I'd be like, sign me up.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
I feel like this is what happened with Hong Kong too, right? Like when Hong Kong joined China, China was like, no, just join us peacefully and everything will stay the same. No. And then after like 5 years, they were like, never mind.
Yeah. And
so maybe that happens in this scenario. Yeah, no, put it in the comments on the website or go to our Facebook page. You can comment there if you'd rather comment there. Like and subscribe, order the magazine, support us on Patreon, buy a book on Amazon. print books.
Share with your friends. Share with your family. This is a really
share with
easy,
your book club.
Not easy, but like interesting and engaging story. Not super complicated.
True.
Show it to a friend. Have them read it and then talk about it.
Oh, by the way, if you do want to buy this particular story, I almost forgot. It is in the November 2021 magazine. If you subscribe, you get all of the back years. You get like 3 years worth now. But if you want to just go buy this one on Amazon or whatever, you can buy it on. It's November 2021.
There's a total of 7 stories in this one. So
there are, yeah. So they're all really good. They're all really outstanding. All right, hey, thanks for joining us. Next week we will do another story, which I'll have to figure out what it is. I don't know what it is off the top of my head.
It'll be also amazing and thrilling and engaging and
true story.
In-depth discussion-y.
Yes, and maybe we'll get Jeremy and Sarah back here too. All right, hey, bye-bye.
If you've enjoyed listening to this, please like and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. You know, the vast majority of people haven't liked and subscribed, which means maybe it shows up in your algorithm, maybe it doesn't. So don't leave that to chance. Just go ahead and hit that button, and we'd sure appreciate that. And that way we can keep doing what we're doing, and you're not left to the whims of some algorithm. Thanks.